And here we go. Episode 128 of the PatteFacts streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts from. It is August 23rd, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm William Patteson. College football is officially back, which means it's time for me to get my predictions in for the college football playoff. On today's episode, I will be giving you my 12 team prediction in addition to who I believe think wins it all. So we'll dive into this today. Really excited for college football to be back. The support on the YouTube channel, the Instagram, the TikTok have been great over the last month, and I am so appreciative of that. So continue to support and follow at ThePatteFacts on Instagram, at ThePatteFacts on Twitter/X, at ThePatteFacts on YouTube, and at TPFacts on Sports on TikTok to get additional content. And guys, we have been ramping it up. It's been so much fun. I am so excited to have college football officially back. And this is also the debut episode of our YouTube channel, doing YouTube videos now for every podcast. So you can watch, you can listen, you can get short-term content. The PatteFacts is now wherever you are. And I'm so excited that we get to debut it with this banger of an episode. And today, I'll be listing out the 12 teams that I believe make it. We'll go into the criteria for each, why I believe they will make it. We'll have a group of 5 team. I'll give you the 4 major conference champions, and we'll go down the list. So really excited to get this going. Let's dive right into it. I want to begin with this. And at number 12, my group of 5 team is going to be UNLV. Now, there are a lot of great group of 5 teams this season. I could have gone really anywhere here. I could have gone with Tulane. I could have gone with Boise State, Army, Memphis. There are a lot of different options here, but I chose UNLV for a specific reason, and that is Dan Mullen. When Dan Mullen was at Florida, his first year he was there, he overtook a program that was kind of in disarray at the time, and he immediately brought Florida back into the national landscape and took them to a New Year's Six Bowl, and they beat Michigan in the Peach Bowl that year. And now he gets an opportunity at UNLV. And the very interesting part about his first year at UNLV is that this group is kind of a mixed bag of former big time names coming out of high school. A Justin Flo, who was a highly touted prospect, started off at Oregon, transferred to Arizona, now at UNLV. A Denver Harris, a former 5-star cornerback that has hopped around all over the place. Alex Orji is the quarterback for this team, one of the quarterbacks for this team. They're still having a quarterback competition, and they will have one in week 0 when they take on Idaho State. But this is a team that I believe has a ton of talent and has the right coach in place to run the table in the Mountain West. The other big part here, the 113th toughest schedule in the country. So they're not having to go up against really tough teams. Their toughest game of the season is going to be a road trip to Boise State. And even if they don't win that one, they'll get another opportunity with them in a neutral site contest. Really won't be a neutral site because they'll be playing the Mountain West Championship in their home building in Las Vegas. And I believe the Running Rebels get it done. There are a lot of really good group of 5 teams, as I mentioned, and trying to predict who that group of 5 team will be is very difficult. It wasn't as difficult last year because a lot of people knew about Ashton Jeanty and how good he is. But this year, there is a good argument for about 5, 6, 7 teams this season. I just go with UNLV because I saw what Dan Mullen did at Florida in year 1, and I project the same for the Running Rebels in year 1 with Mullen. Because of all the talent they have in the building, I think Mullen will be able to create a really good offensive system, whether it's Orji or Casablanca at the other quarterback position. Whether either of those guys take that role, Mullen will find a way to make those guys successful, as he did at Florida with a Felipe Franks when he took over that team. Felipe Franks was a mess his freshman year under Jim McElwain. Mullen comes in and turns him into a very serviceable quarterback, one of the top quarterbacks, maybe not top quarterbacks in the SEC, but one of the upper half quarterbacks that season in the SEC was Felipe Franks. And Kyle Trask, for Christ's sake, was a guy that was a walk-on, had 2 offers coming out of high school. And Florida was one of them, was a backup for most of his time, comes into the situation and ends up turning into an NFL draft pick. So Mullen knows how to craft an offense. He knows how to elevate players on his roster. And that's why I believe the Running Rebels will be the group of 5 team. So the group of 5 is out of the way. Let's get into the at-large bids. And we're going to continue to go down the list here. When there is a conference champion, I will let you know. But this team is going to be in the conference championship in my eyes, but is not going to be able to win it, but they still will make it. And that is Kansas State, the Wildcats, who had a little bit of a rebuilding campaign last year on the offensive side of the ball. The Wildcats had plenty of stars, plenty of firepower, but they had little experience to count on. And now the Wildcats have invested enough to keep those players in place. And with that added experience under their belt, I think this is a team that is going to be competing for a Big 12 championship this season, and they're going to have a strong year. They open up in Ireland with Iowa State. I believe they'll win that game. And then if they make it to the Big 12 championship, I think it's going to be too tough to keep them out of this field, despite a lot of other really good teams in the country. I think there should be weight for a team that makes the conference championship and also has a really good season. So even if this is a one-loss team, I believe that this is a group that will enter that Big 12 championship with an opportunity to not only win, but also have an opportunity to make the college football playoff. The one loss I see on their schedule right now is going to be at Baylor in week 6. And I think Baylor is a really, really strong team. But I think Baylor has a little bit of a tougher schedule. So I favor Kansas State here, and I believe they'll be the team that makes it. I think Baylor is going to be really good, and I could have them in this spot as well. But I go Kansas State here. I know you might be saying, William, how in the world do you have Baylor beating Kansas State, but Baylor doesn't make the field? You have Kansas State making the field. Again, just the schedule for Baylor, I think, is a tad more difficult. For Kansas State, Iowa State in week 0, Baylor on the road in week 6, Texas Tech at home in week 10. And then I threw this one on here too, because Utah is a little bit of a toss-up for me. I don't have a great gauge on what they'll be this season, but it's always tough to play them on the road under Kyle Whittingham. And Kansas State does that in week 13. So that could be the game that possibly takes them out of the Big 12 championship race and prevents them from going to Dallas and playing in that game. But I believe they're going to be the better team on paper. So right now, I believe you're going to have a one-loss Kansas State team at the worst walk into Dallas for that Big 12 championship matchup. And getting into a couple of the player specifics here, Avery Johnson, a guy I was really high on going into last year, again, was a part of that rebuilding year. Now he's a year older. He's much more confident. He's a vocal leader. He's improved on the deep ball. And we know how good he is as a runner. One of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country. The guy has great speed, and he's so difficult to bring down. Was the leading rusher in terms of quarterbacks last season in the Big 12. And it helps that you have Dylan Edwards returning at running back. Edwards was a focal point of that offense last season. He returns. Joe Jackson also in that backfield as well. The strength of the offense is going to come from the quarterback and running back position. And what's going to make or break them being like a Big 12 championship team is going to be how fast the transfers of Jaron Bradley and Jaron Tibbs can get up to speed in terms of the receivers. But Jace Brown is going to be an all Big 12 player this year. Jace Brown, one of the best wide receivers in this conference, and he's going to be really, really strong. In addition to those transfer wide receivers, the offensive line, a bit of a concern for me, but I believe Kansas State's going to be a one-loss team entering that championship weekend, and I think that's enough to put them in the college football playoff. Keep in mind, and I should have noted this as well, Austin Romaine at linebacker going to be the best in the Big 12. VJ Payne could be an all Big 12 player as well. So I'm basing this off that year 2 jump from Avery Johnson. And I believe in this Kansas State team after a rebuilding year. I think they've gotten their stuff together. And again, I think this is going to be a team that makes it to the Big 12 championship. All right, we'll move now to number 10, and that is going to be LSU. Now, LSU has had a couple of disappointing seasons with Brian Kelly, and I understand that they've got a tough schedule this season, but the reason why I have them making it is because they've got one of the best teams one of the best rosters in the country. I'll say that. One of the best rosters in the country, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and they've got a strong defensive side of the ball. They rank tied for 10th in return production with only 8 guys, including 4 on the offense, 4 on the defense. The 11th toughest schedule, and they do have some tough ones, and that's why I have them a little bit farther back. They're at Clemson in week 1. I think Clemson wins that game, but LSU will get a bounce back win against Florida in week 3, and that one's at home. At Ole Miss, I think will be a test, but I think LSU has a stronger team at that point in the season. They get a win there. South Carolina, week 7 at home, and that's off a bye. I favor the Tigers in that one as well. Texas A&M has to travel to Death Valley. I see a win there. What could trip LSU up, especially coming off that loss in week 1 to Clemson, at Alabama in week 11, they are off a bye, and then at Oklahoma in week 14. I think that game at Oklahoma is what will make or break this team in terms of making the college football playoff field. I think Oklahoma is going to be pretty good. Now, they've got a tough schedule too, but this could be one of those things where at that point in the season, they are a really good team, and that's going to be a tough place to win in the final game of the regular season. But at least right now, I think LSU is a stronger team, so I'm going to put them over Oklahoma. LSU is a 2-loss SEC team, takes that 10th spot, and Garrett Nussmeier, going to be a Heisman Trophy level quarterback this season, 4,052 yards and 29 touchdowns last year. I think the one thing he has to improve on is interceptions and decision-making. A couple of times LSU was in some really close games, and Nussmeier would kind of take him out of it by turning the ball over and putting him in some tight situations. I go back to that Texas A&M game last year where Nussmeier and LSU were on the road. They were up by a couple of possessions, I think 10 points at the time. And you had a Garrett Nussmeier turnover. Marcel Reed comes in for Connor Weigman, and Reed was basically unstoppable, but LSU was never able to find that momentum again because of those turnovers. So if Nussmeier's better with his turnovers, I believe this is the best team Brian Kelly has had, and it goes beyond just Nussmeier. Aaron Anderson comes back. He had a team best 61 catches for 884 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. You had a speedy transfer receiver in Barian Brown from Kentucky, another transfer from Oklahoma, and Nick Anderson, who's a veteran, is experienced, a long frame to hit down the field. And then Trey'Dez Green is going to be a rising star for this team at tight end. I like a lot of pieces of this LSU offense. And again, I think it's going to be strong. What has kept this team from being a national title contender, though, over the last really 5 years has been the defense. This is the most confident I've been in their defense this upcoming year. Harold Perkins comes back, a surprise returnee. Many thought he would go to the NFL draft. He comes back. That's really big. You add Jack Pyburn from Florida, Patrick Payton from Florida State as 2 really strong edge rushers. Whit Weeks was the top tackler for LSU in 2024. He had a really strong second half of the season. He's expected to be back fully healthy for the opener. He did break his ankle in the Texas Bowl last year, but Weeks will be back. And I think up front, they're going to be strong. The question over the last 5 years has been, what's that secondary going to look like? They haven't had that, Patrick Peterson, that Derek Stingley. They haven't had that type of guy over the last 4 to 5 years. But I think they could possibly have it this year, and he's going to be a freshman. DJ Pickett, a 6'5", 5-star prospect at cornerback, a 6'5" corner. That is insane. And this is a guy that I think will immediately make an impact for this defense right away. And that's going to be a tough matchup for any opposing team to go up against. So this is the most well-rounded team LSU has had under Brian Kelly. I think they'll end up with 2 losses, but they'll be one of the stronger 2-loss SEC teams when you look at how their schedule stacks up. So I have them in my top 12. At number 9, I've got Alabama. And the reason I have Alabama above LSU is because I believe that the Tide will beat LSU at home when they match up. So there are a lot of great things about this Alabama team this year. They return 8 guys on defense, which I think is really important. Their out-of-conference schedule looked tough, probably when they scheduled it. at Florida State week 1, Wisconsin in week 3. That one's at home. But now Florida State is starting a 5'10" quarterback in Thomas Castellanos. I think Alabama's just going to out-physical them, just be too much for them to handle on both sides of the ball. Wisconsin has really disappointed under Luke Fickell, and I don't see the Badgers coming into T-Town and getting a win there. So I think they're unblemished, and they're out of conference schedule. And then you look at their SEC schedule. At Georgia, week 5 off a bye. I think that's going to be a loss. They go Tennessee at home in week 8, South Carolina at home in week 9, and then LSU week 11 off a bye. That one's also at home. And then Oklahoma at home once again in week 12. So that's an important SEC stretch there. Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, and that's all in the span of 5 weeks. But I think Alabama is the better team on paper than all of those groups. And though I think, or excuse me, actually, that South Carolina game is at South Carolina. Errors and omissions. I do apologize. At South Carolina in week 9, that could be a tough one, especially if it's at night. And I presume it will probably be, as South Carolina is a highly touted team coming into the year. But even despite that, I believe that they're the stronger group, being Alabama defensively. And it's going to be a lot for Lenora Sellers to handle. And South Carolina's defense lost a lot last season as well. I do like Dylan Stewart on the edge, but I don't think they're as good in the secondary, as good in the linebacking group as they were last year. So I look at a win here for Alabama. At Auburn, week 14 is what could make them a 2-loss team, if not that South Carolina game. But I do believe that if you have wins over Tennessee, LSU, and Oklahoma, it's going to be strong enough to win. And I think they'll win one of, or if not both, South Carolina and Auburn. So this is the 8th spot in the SEC. I think it's going to be a 2-loss team. And that's why I have them just one spot above LSU here at number 9. It's not going to be enough to put them in the SEC championship because of the other 2 teams in the SEC. They're just going to be a smidge stronger, but it's still going to be a really good team. I like everything about this group outside of quarterback, so we'll get to that last. Offense coordinator Ryan Grubb repartners with Kalen DeBoer. Grubb was a part of that Washington team a couple of years ago that won the national championship. He was the offensive mind and called the plays. I really like that. The wide receiver room, going to be one of the best in the country. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton comes over from Miami. Really strong group there. And the offensive line, going to be really, really good as well. Caden Proctor, Parker Brailsford, 2 of the best at their position in college football. So the offense, I think, will be strong. Quarterback is an issue. I'm not a Ty Simpson guy. And I think their best guy on the roster is Keelan Russell. He's not going to play right away, but I could see a point in the season where Alabama knows how good they are offensively. And if they're not hitting that threshold, I would not be surprised if Grubb or DeBoer said, all right, it's time to make a switch. Everyone keeps telling me, William, Ty Simpson is going to be just like Mac Jones and Greg McElroy. Well, Mac Jones played on a really, really talented Alabama team as well. And I think this one is really talented, not as good as that Mac Jones team outside of him. But let's keep a couple of things in mind. That was a COVID year where things were all over the place. And B, the transfer portal wasn't as chaotic as it is now, where you have depth concerns across the country where teams aren't as deep as they would have been in 2020. And that means that, if one guy goes down, there's a little bit more of a limitation of that next guy up. So that's really big. And finally, the third thing, Nick Saban's not on the sideline. Nick Saban is one of the best in-game adjustment coaches that I have ever seen, and that's why he's the GOAT of college football. Greatest coach of all time, because he could get you on those in-game adjustments. I'm not saying Kalen DeBoer is some scrub, but I don't think Kalen DeBoer is on the level of Nick Saban in the final couple of years of his career. So I get it's an easy comparison to compare a white quarterback and Ty Simpson to a white quarterback and Mac Jones. Outside of that, there's a lot of differences, and I don't buy the smoke there. I look at Keelan Russell as the best quarterback on this roster. If Ty Simpson disappoints, I think we could see a switch at some point this season. And real quick on the defense, Deontay Lawson, Keon Sabb, both those guys come back from injury. They missed time last year. They could have been NFL draft picks. They decided to come back. Really love that. Damani Jackson as a defensive back is going to headline a very talented cornerback room as well. So there are a lot of things I like about this Alabama team. They're going to have a good defense. The offensive weapons are there. Kalen DeBoer in year two with his offensive scheme is going to make this a college football playoff team. But quarterback is the biggest question mark, and that's why I don't have them any higher than this, and that's why I won't have them winning the national championship. But still, a very good group for Kalen DeBoer in year two. A lot of pressure for this team as well. So Alabama at number 8. All right, at number 7, Alabama at number 9. At number 8, I should say, Arizona State. And this is who I believe will win the Big 12 for the second year in a row. Last year, they were picked to finish last ahead of their Big 12 debut, and they ended up winning the whole damn thing. And this is a really good team once again. They rank first in return production ranking. 14 guys come back, 7 on the offense, 10 on the defense, 72nd in strength of schedule. And their notable games are pretty easy. At Mississippi State in week 2, that's not scaring anyone. So they're out of conference is a pretty seamless transition. And then at Baylor in week 4, I think could be a tough one, but I think they'll have the better team in that matchup. At Utah, week 7 could get dicey as well, but the better team in that matchup. Having Texas Tech at home in week 8, I think is big because Texas Tech is a team that is loaded up through the transfer portal. They've got a ton of really good players. Having that game at home, I think, is important. And then at Iowa State in week 10 is also look, it's a difficult one. Their road games are a little bit tough, but overall, I think their schedule is very manageable. At Iowa State, I'm interested to see where the Cyclones are at that point in the season. I'm projecting Kansas State to beat them week 0. And Iowa State last year had a ton of injury problems, but they also had a lot of guys leave. You had 2 NFL wide receivers that were a big part of that offense. You had a couple of really key contributors defensively as well that have graduated or gone to the NFL. I'm not saying Iowa State won't be good, but I think Arizona State will have more momentum at this point in the season than Iowa State. It'll probably be a short line, a very close game, but I believe the Sun Devils will get it done, and they will be back in Dallas for the Big 12 championship game. And a big reason why is because of the way that Kenny Dillingham runs this team. I'm a huge fan of Kenny Dillingham. I love the guy. Very similar to Dan Lanning. And ironically, they both coached at Memphis together before going their separate ways. But Dillingham is a guy that is a player's coach. He's a program builder, and that is exactly what he's done with this Sun Devils team. On offense, you've got Marcus Arroyo, the only offensive coordinator that was nominated for the 2024 Broyles Award, and that goes to the best coordinator each season. This group welcomes back 4 starting offensive linemen, as well as an all-conference tight end and Shimon Mateer. Big 12 offensive newcomer of the year last year in Jordan Tyson, who's a top 3 wide receiver in the country. We'll say top 4, top 5. I had him at number 4 in mind, but we'll just say top 5 to make it a little bit easier. But Jordan Tyson is going to be really, really good. And then you got Big 12 offensive freshman of the year last year, Sam Levitt as well. So that's kind of like your big 3, Mateer, Tyson, Levitt. I know a lot of people loved Cam Skattebo last year, but they also reloaded at running back where you've got Kyson Brown, who was Skattebo's backup last season. And then you got Raleek Brown, who's kind of this twitchy utility back that's really good. And then Kanye Uda comes over from Army, and he was a 1,100-yard rusher last year in 2024. They've got a good depth there in the running back room. So if one guy can't do it, if one guy can't fill Cam Skattebo's shoes, then at least 3 guys can. So offensively, I think it could be one of the most fun offenses in the country. And the fact that you have a really strong offensive coordinator and an offensive minded coach, I think will bode well. And then defensively, there's a lot to like here as well. You've got 3 2024 all conference performers. Safety Xavier Alford, who's a vocal leader of this defense, had a great season last year, is going to have another good one this year. You got defensive tackle CJ Fight, and you got linebacker Keyshawn Elliott. You've got a top tier player at every level on your defense in terms of the Big 12, and I think they'll be really, really strong. So they're the best team in the Big 12 to me. The biggest test, I think, is going to be how they handle going from the hunter to the hunted. But this is going to be a group that is in the Big 12 championship game. I believe they win it, so they get that automatic bid. And just because the SEC has a little bit more weight and a couple of these other teams in front of them are in some stronger conferences that might have just 1 loss or 2 losses, but stronger wins, I put Arizona State at 8. All right, we'll move to number 7 now. And this is a little bit of a sleeper team this year. I was talking about it earlier when I was, at work, I worked for Fox Sports. We were talking about in the office, just some of these teams that are kind of going under the radar. And Oregon was one of them that was mentioned. And they go, William, what's the read on Oregon? And I go, well, look at their schedule. I think it's manageable. At a conference, Oklahoma State week 2, that's a win. Oregon State week 4 at home, that's a win. And then the rest of the way, there are 4 key Big Ten matchups. At Penn State in week 5, that's going to be really tough. Penn State probably gets that one done, but I think that's their only loss of the year for Oregon. Indiana week 7, that's going to be off a bye, most likely off a loss to Penn State. Oregon will be ready to go for that one. At Iowa, week 11, it's going to be cold, which could be a little bit of a wrinkle worth noting. But Oregon's offense, I think at that point in the season, will have much more momentum than it currently seems like it does right now. And I think it's just going to be too overwhelming for an Iowa team that usually sets back the clock 100 years on the offensive side of the ball. Just too much to catch up with. And they wrap up with USC in week 13. USC hasn't proven anything to me to go into Oregon in week 13 and get this win. So I look at Oregon as a 1-loss team. And as we go down the list here, these are all going to be 1-loss or undefeated teams. So the schedule, I think, sets up for an 11-1 year. At quarterback, you've got Dante Moore, a former 5-star. He's now got the keys to the offense. He's waited his turn. I believe that he's going to be the next great Oregon quarterback. And though he doesn't have an Evan Stewart alongside him, as he's out for the season or should at least miss almost all of the year, could return for the postseason, but unlikely. I really, really like a dynamic freshman in DeCorian Moore, who I think could be one of the big surprises of the 2025 college football season. A 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school, was so dominant on Friday nights, and I think he'll be able to replicate that at Oregon as being one of those focal wide receivers. And then at running back, you do lose, guys you had last year, but Tulane transfer McKee Hughes was one of the top guys in the portal, rushed for 1,401 yards and 15 touchdowns last year for the Green Wave. I think he'll be really strong. And then you got a possible breakout star in tight end and Kenyon Sadiq. So I think there are some questions about Oregon's offense, and I totally get it. But this is Dan Lanning, and Dan Lanning has proven to you that year in and year out, he's going to field a good team and he's going to field a good offense. I think he'll do just fine with Dante Moore, McKee Hughes, and DeCorian Moore, at least to begin the year, as an offense that can get in rhythm by midseason and as the year goes on. They might not be undefeated like they were last year. I think Penn State will be a loss for them. But the defensive side of the ball, I think, could be intriguing, where you have Mateo Uungale and Tatum Tuturi on the defensive edge. And I think they'll form one of the best pass rushing tandems in the country. So that'll be strong. Again, a lot to replace guys like Derek Harmon and Jeffrey Bass, Jabbar Muhammad. But they did well in the portal. Purdue transfer Dylan Thieneman, I think, will be one of the stronger defensive backs in the about said Pac-12 there. Errors and omissions again. in the Big Ten. And again, Oregon has shown you year in and year out that they can reload and they can identify talent through recruiting classes. Dan Lanning, a program builder, a players coach, keeps those guys around and they'll step into those positions. And then inside, they added a lot of transfer players as well. Bear Alexander is on another team, folks. This is like his fourth team. But him, along with Amari Washington and Devon Jackson, I think will be full-time contributors and be beneficial for this defensive front. So overall, I just think Oregon recruits at a higher level and is going to have an offense that will be in rhythm by the midpoint of the season when the meat of their schedule begins. And outside of Penn State, I don't see this team dropping another game. And that's why they're going to be in my college football playoff at number 7. I'm a big Dan Lanning guy. It's ironic that we go from Arizona State right to Oregon with both those guys having a pass together. But I love these type of motivator coaches that are really impactful in their players' lives, can continue to get the best out of them. I think is where I'm going with that. I know I was at a loss of words there for a second. I'm not that amused by them. They are really good, but I just really like the way they coach, their style, the way they build their program, and I've got to trust that year in and year out. I can't trust it as much with Dillingham because we've only seen it for one season, but I can trust it with Lanning, who has shown me year after year this is going to be a top-tier team. All right, moving on to number 6, I've got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Marcus Freeman has had a roller coaster of a time at Notre Dame. He's had losses to Marshall. He's had losses to Northern Illinois. But he's also got this team in college football playoff contention year in and year out. And last year put up a really good fight in the championship game. I know it started off a little lopsided, but that team continued to grind, turn the wheel, and made it a game in the second half where they had opportunities to win that one. But this season, you're going to see a totally different offense, a new identity, at least at quarterback, and how they want to play. And they've got one of the best running back tandems in the country. We'll talk more about that here in a second. But looking at their schedule, 38th in the country at Miami in week 1, I would say is a tough matchup, but who the hell goes to Miami games? You know, I mean, Miami year in and year out can field pretty competitive teams, but Coral Gables just hasn't been the same. So I don't even know if that's going to be a rocking environment. There could be a lot of Notre Dame fans there. So I think they'll beat Miami in week 1. I don't look at the home field advantage of the Hurricanes as some big differential here. So on what basically will be a 70-30 stadium in terms of Miami fans to Notre Dame fans, I lean with the Fighting Irish. And then you got Texas A&M in week 3. That's off of bye, and that one's in your own building. Texas A&M is a good team. It's tough to go on the road and win games, and I don't think Notre Dame's losing at home. The craziest game of the season will be at Arkansas in week 5. Why the hell is Notre Dame playing at Arkansas in week 5? I have no idea. It's the craziest game of the year, and when you turn on the TV that week, you'll ask probably the same question. But they didn't have Boise State in week 6, USC in week 8. I think those are both wins, and this will be most likely a one-loss or unblemished team. But since the committee does hold a lot of weight of you playing a true conference schedule, I put them here at number 6 because, Notre Dame's not in a conference. But I talked about that offense earlier, and I want to go in a little bit in depth here. C.J. Carr, redshirt freshman quarterback, has officially been named the starter. And this is a guy that has a firm grasp of the offense. He's gained some experience through training camp. And I think he's going to revitalize what was a struggling passing attack at times last year. Riley Leonard was great, but they were run first. With C.J. Carr, I think they'll be more pass first. And that will be really big for guys like Jaden Greathouse, who had a breakout season, maybe breakout postseason, we'll say, as he had 13 catches for 233 yards and 3 touchdowns against Penn State and Ohio State in the final 2 games of the college football playoff. And then you add in Malachi Fields from Virginia, you get a true 1-2 punch at receiver to go alongside a real 1-2 punch with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, who combined for 1,871 yards and 24 touchdowns on the ground last year. One of the best running back tandems in the country. I loved watching them play, and they're going to be really good once again this year. Jeremiah Love, I saw some tape of him a couple of weeks ago, and that guy is going to be good. So defenses prepare for him. Speaking of defenses, Notre Dame will be strong there once again. You have a new defensive coordinator who's going to fill in for Al Golden, and that's going to be a little bit of a concern. Chris Ash is going to fill those shoes, and they're big shoes to fill, but he inherits a deep and talented defense. Sophomore Leonard Moore is going to be a rising star. Christian Gray, one of the best corners in the country. They're going to form a really nice duo. Don Schuler, who was so good one-on-one against tight ends last year, is also poised for a breakout year. And then on the defensive line, there's not that necessarily star player, but they've got a lot of depth, a deep edge rotation, a deep interior. This is going to be a really strong group once again. And Marcus Freeman, for as much flack as he has caught for losing some games, he probably should have won. Notre Dame's got an easy schedule, a favorable one, that is. Maybe not easy because they do have a couple of tough games, but a favorable schedule. I believe they'll be a one-loss team just because they're not in a conference. They get a little bit of a knock, but this is still going to be a really, really good group. One of the best running back tandems in the country, a revitalized offense. Notre Dame's going to be pretty good. All right, at number 5, we've got the Georgia Bulldogs. And Georgia is a team that I think could very well end up winning the national championship. I think they're kind of flying under the radar just a smidge as well because of Gunnar Stockton and kind of the hype that Carson Beck received last offseason. Like, he was one of the top quarterbacks. Stockton isn't in those conversations. And when you looked at Georgia's offense last year, it was out of sorts a lot of times. And that's because they were the worst team in the country in holding on to the football in the air. Worst team. And drop passes last season. But that's going to change with what they did in the portal. Before we get to that, they're tied for 11th in return production ranking. 4 offense guys return, 3 defense guys return. Strength of schedule, it's 8th. At Tennessee in week 3 is going to be difficult. I think that could be Tennessee's best chance to beat the Bulldogs at that point in the season. And we know that Georgia has always struggled early on in the year. Go back to last year. Kentucky and Georgia. That was a really weird game, and Georgia struggled. Will they do that against Tennessee, where they've won their last 8 games and all of them by double digits? I don't know, but I think that's a tough spot to begin the year for a new quarterback and a new offense. But they'll have a bounce back opportunity regardless of if they win that game or lose that game in week 5, off a bye against Alabama. Going to be one of the biggest games of the season, like it was last year. It was an instant classic. Maybe we'll get another one this year with new quarterbacks, new personnel on both sides. But I think that's a win. I don't see any team beating Georgia beating Georgia in their own building. So I believe Alabama is going to be a win. At Auburn, week 7 could be interesting depending on what the Tigers look like at that point in the season. They could be around 500, and Hugh Freeze already knows he's out the door. So you could get an Auburn team that is kind of walking on eggshells. But then you wrap up the year with Ole Miss at home in week 8. That's a win. Lane Kiffin's not going on the road and winning that. Florida, neutral site game in week 10. I believe the Dogs will put up a fight in that one. That could be a tough game depending on where Florida is at that point in the season, specifically their health. But again, that's a winnable game for Georgia. And then week 12, Texas comes to town. I don't see Georgia losing at home. So they could very well be an undefeated team at the end of the season or a one-loss team, but they're not my SEC champion. And it's important that Texas loses in week 12 because, well, spoiler alert here, I think they win in the SEC championship. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but I think Georgia has a winnable schedule. They could go undefeated, if not one loss, and they're going to be one of the strongest teams in the country. I believe in Gunnar Stockton because Kirby Smart has already proven to me that you can win with a frat boy in, Stetson Bennett. I mean, good Lord, that guy was doing a ton of different things after the game and was still able to win that team a national championship. And you totally retooled with your wide receiver room. Zachariah Branch, a former 5-star recruit from USC, he's going to man that slot position. He's going to be a speedster. Noah Thomas comes over from Texas A&M. Really like what he brings to the table. And then you've got Colby Young and Dylan Bell who are back, and they're both kind of do-it-all weapons. Oscar Delp at the tight end position, I think will be really good once again. And then at running back, Nate Frazier returns, and he shined at times last year as a freshman. Chauncey Bowen's another intriguing piece. He had a good performance in the spring game. Bo Walker as well. Both those guys could possibly get involved, but I think the key for Georgia's offense is going to be establishing the run with an offensive line that lost 4 starters from last year. If Georgia's able to do that, take a little bit of the pressure off of a Gunnar Stockton, I think you'll see the passing game really open up and have a lot more opportunities to have big plays. I'm not worried about Georgia's offense. Kirby Smart's already proven it. And you might be at this point in the video and you're saying, William, well, you're not a Ty Simpson guy. How can you believe in Gunnar Stockton? Well, Ty Simpson isn't being coached by Nick Saban and isn't in the same situation as a Mac Jones was a couple of years ago. Georgia still has Kirby Smart, still has that personnel. And this is a team that has proven year in and year out, if you have good enough quarterback play, you will be good. So everything in my mind tells me Gunnar Stockton is going to be just fine. Defensively, expect this to be another Georgia defense. Littered with 5-star talent, guys that are going to be playing in the NFL draft. Dalen Everett, the most experienced guy on this team, he's going to be in the secondary. KJ Bolden, I think, is primed for a strong second season. There are a lot of really good players on this Georgia defense, brimming with speed, brimming with veterans. This is going to be a good team. I'm not worried about Georgia. I just do think they will lose in that SEC championship game. That's why I have them here at number 5. And now we'll get into my top 4. And again, I should have said this earlier, and that's on me. But this year, the college football playoff ranking system, the seed system, works different. So the top 4 conference winners do not get an automatic bye anymore. It's just the top 4 seeds. So you don't have to win your conference to necessarily get a top 4 seed. And this team will be the lone team that does not win their conference championship, but does get an automatic bye. And that's Ohio State. A big reason why is because of their schedule. I think they could possibly lose week 1 to Texas. And right now, in my mind, I think they do. But that's an early season loss. And it's going to be to a team that is going to be, later in the year, a really, really good group. I mean, they're going to be my number 1 seed, will Texas. And I think they're going to beat Illinois. I think it'll be a tough matchup, but Ohio State will be the better team. They'll have 5-6 weeks to kind of get their stuff together and go into Champaign and get that one done. Penn State week 10, I think is kind of like the toss-up game. Penn State should beat Ohio State, but James Franklin, it doesn't matter if he has the better team or not, just can't get it done. I do think Penn State will be really good, though. So I think you could go a couple of different ways here. If you believe that Ohio State loses to Texas, you could see them beating Penn State. I go back and forth here. I do believe that Ohio State beats Michigan. All in all, this is a 1-loss Ohio State team. Whether it's Texas or Penn State, this is a 1-loss Ohio State team. Julian Sand, I'm a little bit worried about, but offensively, you have Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. That's one of the best wide receiving cores in the country. And it doesn't matter what Julian Sand does. As long as he gets it within a 20-yard vicinity of Jeremiah Smith, he'll catch the ball and go make a play. So I'm interested to see how that works out with Sand being the new guy. And again, that's why I'm not head over heels for them to beat Texas in week 1. I think the big storyline of that game is, Arch Manning and his debut. I'm not so sure that he's the guy at quarterback that we should be watching. I think Sand is more the bigger storyline here. But offensively, they'll be fine because of that wide receiver room. And defensively, they're going to be really good once again. Caleb Downs, one of the best players in the country, period. He's right alongside Davison Igbunison in the secondary, who's a physical corner, rises to those big moments. Jermaine Matthews, another guy in coverage to watch for. I think he'll take that next step and kind of form a big three in the secondary between Downs, Patteson, and Matthews. And then they do lose Cody Simon, who was their leading tackler last year, but Sonny Styles comes back. And then you have Arvell Reese, who is a rising talent, had some moments last season, and you could see where he is able to really get the wheels turning. And you got a new defense coordinator, no more Jim Knowles. He's at Penn State, but Matt Patricia, a guy that has plenty of experience with defensive pieces and running a defensive system. I think Ohio State will be just fine. They get the 4th seed because of their relatively favorable schedule. I see possibly one loss, but they're going to be in the Big Ten, which is going to be the best conference. They'll be a top 2 team in that conference. I think it'll be enough to put them in. And just because they could possibly beat Texas in week 1, I'll put them over Georgia in this instance. And then we move to my 3rd spot, and that is Clemson. Now, I believe Clemson is the best team in the country. The reason why I don't have Clemson as the number 1 team is because I could possibly see them getting dethroned week 14 at South Carolina. I think they'll beat LSU. They'll beat SMU in week 8. At Louisville, week 12 could be interesting, especially for what Louisville did to the Tigers last year. But that South Carolina game, I've kind of got pinpointed, and no national champion so far in the 12-team playoff, granted it's only been 1 year, has been undefeated and won the national title. So in order for Clemson to do it, I've got to have Clemson lose a game, and that's going to be South Carolina. But they're going to be a conference championship winner. The ACC, not that strong. I think it's Clemson, Miami, Louisville, and then a little bit of a lower down SMU, and then the rest. So Clemson, as a conference champion, will be a top 4 seed. They're going to be the 3rd seed in my eyes. And this is going to be a really good team. 16 returning starters, 8 on the offense, 8 on the defense, the 40th toughest schedule. And I love Cade Klubnik. Talk about a guy that has totally just done a 180 on his career. In 2023, he was 102nd among FBS signal callers with a 63.9 PFF grade. Last year, he ranked 5th with an 87.7 mark, a huge difference from one year to the other. And he had 43 total touchdowns last season, 36 passing, 7 rushing, started playing like an actual 5-star that he was when he was one of the top 20 players in the country coming out. This is going to be a really, really good team because of Cade Klubnik, but it's also because of the guys they have around him. Antonio Williams, a top 5 wide receiver, going to be really, really good. An NFL guy. Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore, a really, really strong 2 and 3. Going to be one of the best receiving cores in the country. And then a very interesting part of this team is Adam Randall, who I believe will be the starter at running back, 6'2", 225 pounds. He's a former wide receiver. He converted to running back. And this is a guy that in the college football playoff busted out a couple of impressive runs against Texas. And that was a good Texas defense. And you do all of that behind an offensive line that returns 4 starters. So if Clemson does get tripped up against South Carolina, I still think this is a team that is a top 4 seed because of their body of work throughout the year. That will include a win in week 1 over LSU, a college football playoff team, and most likely beating a Miami in the ACC championship game, which would be teetering around a college football playoff team. SMU, I don't think is going to be that good. I think they'll be a 4-loss team, but at least at the time, that was a group that was just in the college football playoff last year. I'm big on Clemson, and I haven't even talked about their defense. I'm sorry. I've got so many notes in front of me here. I forgot to talk about their defense. Tom Allen, defensive coordinator for this team, taking over for Wes Goodwin, who was an absolute disaster. Tom Allen, plenty of experience, former Indiana head coach and Penn State defensive coordinator. He's going to have a really big impact for this team. And his job is going to be made a lot easier with guys like Peter Woods and TJ Parker. Those are NFL talents. Purdue transfer will help defensive end wise as well. really, really good group. And Parker set the Clemson record for forced fumbles in a single season with 6 in 2024 and had 12 and a half tackles for loss in 2023 that broke Clemson's true freshman record. So this is a guy that's due for another big season. And having Avion Terrell and Ashton Hampton in the secondary, a great 1-2 punch at corner. Shout out to my guy, Ashton Hampton, by the way, reposted one of my videos on the PatteFacts. So I appreciate you, Ashton. Big fan of you this season and big fan of this Clemson secondary, as I think they've got a really, really talented group. 2 NFL guys I just named right there, Terrell and Hampton. So I think depth in the secondary is a little bit of a concern, but having 2 NFL guys is enough for me to say I'm good there. And this is a championship level team that is bursting with NFL talent. Coach Swinney's already proven to me that he can win on the biggest stage. And I'll talk more about this in my championship prediction, but in terms of making the college football playoff, this will be the ACC championship winner, and this is going to be a top 4 seed. We'll talk more about that championship stuff here in a minute for the college football playoff, but I will continue on to number 2, and that's going to be Penn State. Now, Penn State, I believe, is the best team in the Big Ten, and this is the best team that James Franklin has ever had, which means that this all-in mentality has a lot of pressure. Now, they've got the horsepower to do it, but they're going to have to figure out receiver. If they do not figure out receiver, this is going to be a team that looks kind of similar to last year, because it kind of is. Tied for 4th in return production ranking, 9 offensive players, 5 defensive players, the 27th toughest schedule in the conference, or excuse me, in the country, I should say. Oregon, week 5 at home. It's off a bye. It's going to be a rocking environment. I like Penn State. At Iowa, week 8. Interesting game, but I think Penn State is able to win that one, especially coming off of some really good momentum after beating Oregon. At Ohio State, week 10 off a bye. Could be their lone loss. They cannot beat the Buckeyes over the last couple of years. This could be a tough one. But even if they lose this, I believe that they're going to win the Big Ten championship game. So this is what puts them at number 2. Regardless of whether they beat Ohio State or not, they'll probably get a second crack at them in that Big Ten championship matchup. And that's going to be a neutral site, which I think will hold more weight. That's why I have Penn State at 2 here, Ohio State at 4. Nittany Lions also have Indiana in week 11. Indiana could be a fringe college football playoff team. I think that'd be a great resume boost coming off a potential loss at Ohio State. But outside of their schedule, this team is that good because of what they return. Drew Aller was great last season in the regular season. 73.7% completion rate, 169.7 efficiency rating. Wasn't great in the playoffs, but I think he's learned from that moment. He's gotten a year under his belt once again. He's grown, and I think this is going to be his strongest season. And this is coming from a guy that used to say Drew Aller can't hit the side of a barn. I'm now saying that he can hit the barn and maybe hit, 3 or 4 barns now, because I think he has grown. And when you've got an offensive coordinator in Andy Kotelnicki that has tried to kind of revamp this passing unit through the portal with Kyron Hudson from USC, Trevor Penna from Syracuse, Devontae Ross from Troy, I think you're going to get answers, especially after last year. Tyler Warren, a tremendous tight end, caught 104 passes. The rest of the Penn State wide receivers, at least the top 6 guys, only caught 102. So it was very tight end centric. I think Kotelnicki this year is trying to say, let's figure out these wide receivers now. Let's go all in. Let's go get some high level transfers. And that's exactly what Penn State did. And when you look at the tight ends, Luke Reynolds or Khalil Dinkins, I think could fill that tight end role of Tyler Warren. Might not be as athletic and as dynamic, but I think they'll be just fine in those 2 tight end sets. We haven't even gotten to the best part of this offense. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. I talked a lot about Notre Dame's 2-headed monster. Penn State is right up there with them. 2 1,000-yard rushers last season. They're playing their 4th year together, and this is going to be a really, really tough duo to tackle. Singleton gives you just that barrel right through. Katron Allen gives you a little bit more elusiveness. Both of these guys are going to be what's the word I'm looking for here? I was going to say impactful, imperative. There he is. Imperative for Penn State to win it all or to get to that championship game, which I believe they will. I think Penn State will get there. I don't think they'll win it, but I do think they'll get there because of these two guys and having the opportunity to rely on them if the wide receiver room is locked up or is inconsistent throughout the season. Those running backs will be a big reason why. And they return behind an offensive line that returns 4 starters. So if that group is healthy, Allen and Singleton will have a lot of success. Now, the big storyline defensively for this team is that Ohio State's defensive coordinator from last year, Jim Knowles, comes over, and he is now the highest paid assistant in college football. You win a national championship with the Buckeyes, you get a payday to come over to the rival with the Nittany Lions. And Knowles was talking about it this summer. He said, quote, I think Penn State is so close to winning it all, and I think I can help. And he definitely can help when you looked at that Buckeyes team last year and what they did defensively. I mean, they were honestly one of the reasons why they were able to make it to the national championship game. Obviously, the offense was dazzling and always did their thing. But Jack Sawyer is the one that prevented Texas from tying that game up in the final moments in the Cotton Bowl. Jim Knowles knows his stuff, a huge addition for Penn State. And you loaded up at defensive end. Deni Dennis Sutton, poised to become that next All-American player. Actually, I believe he's hurt. Actually, he is hurt. So might not see him. A lot of notes here. I am sorry. But Zakee Wheatley is healthy. He's got 5 career interceptions. He's a 5th-year senior. He's got the experience. You got cornerback A.J. Harris. That's an NFL prospect. You got an underrated tackle in Zane Durant. I think this is a group that will once again be one of the strongest in the country. I'm sorry that Deni Dennis Sutton won't be available, at least early in the season. We'll have to see his health status. But again, Jim Knowles has already proven that he can coach a really talented defense and make him a championship-level defense. I think he'll do the same here for Penn State. This is Penn State's best team maybe ever, at least under James Franklin. And there's no excuse for them not to win it all, or at least be a top seed in the college football playoff. And I believe Franklin knows that and knows that he has to be in this number 2 position in the playoff field to have a easier opportunity to hoist a trophy at the end of the season. So Penn State, number 2 for me. Finally, at number 1, we have Texas. The SEC's best team will be the number 1 seed in my eyes. I could see Penn State maybe taking it, but I think Texas could be undefeated if they're able to beat Georgia in the SEC. Well, actually, I'll backtrack that. They won't be undefeated because they'll lose to Georgia in week 12 on the road. But if they beat them in the SEC championship, I believe on a neutral site field a couple of weeks later, that is going to hold more weight than losing on the road a couple of weeks before. Like, neutral site carries a lot of weight. You know, the crowd is split. There's not the, home environment. You know what I mean, So I think if Texas beats Georgia in the SEC championship, that will put them at the number 1 seed. And I think this is a group that could knock off Ohio State in week 1. So I have them at number 1 here. Tied for 9th in return production ranking. 3 offensive guys, 6 defensive guys, which is really significant. At Ohio State week 1, it's going to be tough. At Florida week 6, I think is a really interesting game. One of the more underrated games in college football this season. Oklahoma week 7, that's going to be a neutral site game. Could be tough as well, but I think Texas will have the stronger defense in that matchup. And 7 weeks into the season, I'm pretty sure that Arch Manning will have everything rolling as well. Texas A&M at home in week 14, I think, is a win. That Georgia game, really the only loss I can confidently say right now on their schedule. And Arch Manning is a very polarizing quarterback. Everyone wants to believe that he's not going to be good, but folks, he's going to be good. Last season, in the games he appeared in, he showcased that he's good in the pocket. He's got a good awareness. He can make plays off script, which I hold a lot of weight to. Can you be a good quarterback when it's scripted in the pocket? But what can you do outside of that? Can you extend plays? Can you make plays down the field? Can you make plays with your legs? Arch Manning has done all of that, and he's going to do this behind an offensive line that's going to have 4 new starters. DJ Campbell does come back, but the interesting thing about these new starters coming in is that all these guys have been working with not Peyton Manning, Arch Manning over the last couple of years in practice. So they've got that chemistry and they know how they work. And it's going to help that Arch is going to have a Contravian Wisner, who ran for 1,064 yards and 5 touchdowns last year, also caught 44 passes for 311 yards and a touchdown last season. In addition to CJ Baxter, who missed last year, he's now back in the mix. That's a really big addition. And the playmakers here are really, really good. DeAndre Moore Jr., Ryan Wingo. You add Stanford transfer Emmett Mosley V. That guy caught 48 passes for 525 yards and 6 touchdowns as a freshman in 2024. This is going to be a really good offense, and it's going to be because of Arch Manning and the array of weapons around him. I love what they have offensively, but I love even more what they have defensively. Folks, get familiar with the name Colin Simmons. Loaded on the edge with him. 9 sacks in 2024. And this is a guy that just busts through defenses, can get in the backfield, can make those big-time plays. And you do that alongside a Trey Moore, who is a former edge that's going to move to the linebacker position. He's a guy that has 19 and a half sacks in his last 2 years. Oh, and Anthony Hill Jr., the best linebacker in the country, is in that group as well. 16 and a half tackles for loss, 8 sacks in 2024. Talk about a dangerous and imposing 2-level defense for Texas. And we haven't even gotten to the secondary. Michael Taft, Jelani McDonald, outside corner Malik Muhammad, Jalen Gilbo. This is going to be a really, really good defense. Probably one of the best, if not the best in the country. And this is why I believe Texas will be the number 1 team in the country in the college football playoff poll when it's all said and done. I don't think they win it because I think it's going to be tough to win with a first-year quarterback as you get on, go on the trek of the postseason and playoff games. I like the experience and the NFL talent of the team that I believe wins, but Texas will be right up there. Like if there were 3 elite teams in college football this season, it would be Texas, Clemson, and Penn State. Texas is right there. They've got the team to do it. Sarkisian has proven year over year that they can make it deep into the college football playoff. Will they be able to hoist the trophy this year? Will they be able to make it to the national championship game? We'll have to see. But they definitely have the talent to do it. And winning the SEC, coming off an SEC championship win over Georgia, I believe they'll be the number 1 seed, as they'll be in the same type of situation as Penn State, that will lose to Ohio State during the season, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And I think just Texas will have a better body of work, more impressive wins, bigger games. Texas will be 1. But they aren't my national championship winner. But before we do that, I will tell you the list one more time from top to bottom so that we're all on the same page, and we'll tell you the winner. Number 12, UNLV, my group of 5 team. I'm really big fan of Dan Mullen. I think in year 1, what he did at Florida is what he can do at year 1 at UNLV. Kansas State, going to be right there in the Big 12. I think the second best team. They're going to make the conference championship, but lose to Arizona State, but they still get a bid. LSU, tough schedule, but this is Brian Kelly's best team ever at LSU. And for that, they're going to win a lot of big games and have a good resume. Number 9, Alabama. Alabama is going to beat LSU, so they'll be 1 spot ahead. I think this is a really, really talented team. I'm not sold on their quarterback situation, but everything else I love. At 8, Arizona State. The best team in the Big 12. They're going to win the conference championship. Sam Leavitt, Jordan Tyson, Shimon Mateer offensively. Defensively, you've got Xavier Alford and CJ Fight and Keyshawn Elliott. This is going to be a really strong team. I love Kenny Dillingham. At number 7, Oregon, a little bit of a sleeper team this year, but Dan Lanning has proven to you year in and year out, this will be a team that is towards the top of the country. Dante Moore and DeCorian Moore going to be a really good quarterback to wide receiver connection. Number 6, Notre Dame. They don't get as much credit here because they don't play a true conference schedule, but I love this group. I think they're going to be more modernized. They're going to see more throwing, and Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love is going to be must-see TV. At number 5, Georgia, the runner-up in the SEC. I think they're going to have a lot of quality wins, and I do like what Gunnar Stockton has in front of them with a reloaded weaponry of receivers and Zachariah Branch and Colby Young and Noah Thomas. And I think defensively, we know that Georgia's going to be strong year in and year out with their speed and veteran presence. Number 4, I've got Ohio State, the reigning national champions, the best receiving room in the country, the best player in the country defensively. Matt Patricia is going to have a couple of the top players at their positions, like a Caleb Downs. I'm not worried about Ohio State. Number 3, Clemson, the ACC winner. I think they could go unblemished, but their one loss could be to South Carolina at the end of the year on the road, which could be a tough one. But this is an NFL-type roster with guys up and down the board, going to be playing on Sundays. Cade Klubnik, the best quarterback in the country. I like the Tigers a lot. At number 2, Penn State, James Franklin, all in this season. Jim Knowles, the highest paid defensive coordinator, the highest paid coordinator, period, in the country, returned 9 guys offensively. They're going to be loaded. This is going to be a really good team. And I think there's no excuse now for the Nittany Lions not to be one of the top teams in the country, if not win it all. And finally, at number 1, Texas, who I believe will win the SEC. Arch Manning, everyone wants to cut him down, but he's got a great weaponry around him. And he's proven so far in his appearances last season that he has a good understanding of the pocket, can extend plays down the field, can run out of the pocket and use his legs to pick up yardage. And I haven't even mentioned the defense yet. The defense is going to be the best in the country with Anthony Hill and Colin Simmons and Trey Moore and Michael Taft. Texas is going to be damn good, and they are number 1 in my projection. However, as we go down the list and we stack all these teams up, my winner for the national championship in 2025, I guess it'll technically be played in 2026, the Clemson Tigers. I believe that Clemson will win the national championship. Cade Klubnik, the best quarterback in the country. Antonio Williams, one of the best wide receivers in the country. An offensive line that returns 4 starters. Adam Randall, a converted wide receiver running back that's going to cause ruckus all season. A loaded defensive side of the ball with TJ Parker and Peter Woods, Avion Terrell, and Ashton Hampton. At all levels, they've got one of the best players on the field. And Dabo Swinney has proven to me before that he can win on the biggest stage. As much as I would love to trust Penn State and as much as I would love to trust Texas, I haven't seen them do it. In fairness, we didn't see Ryan Day do it until last year. But I see Clemson as the best team in the country, and I see Clemson winning under Dabo Swinney because he's been there before and knows how to do it, and he has the damn roster to do it. Give me the Tigers to win the national championship. And that's going to wrap it up for episode 128 of the PatteFacts. I hope you enjoyed. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Hit that button right there down below. Never miss an episode. We're going to be doing recaps weekly of all the action from college football, week 0, all the way to the final game of the season. So you don't want to miss anything. At the PatteFacts on Instagram, at the PatteFacts on Twitter/X, at the PatteFacts on YouTube as well, at TPFacts on Sports on TikTok. And also, if you want more of me outside of the PatteFacts, you can listen to me daily on Fox Sports Knoxville's Fan Run Radio from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the free Fan Run Radio app or on the local dial or on the YouTube live stream. So if you want to check me out more Monday through Friday, check me out there. Other than that, college football is officially back. Let's get things going. Hope y'all have a great weekend. College football.